Negotiating leases like a ninja. The do's, the don'ts, the tips. We're going to give them all to you this morning. Stay tuned.
I'm the ringleader, so listen up.
Welcome to Morning
Really?
Minutes. Self, Michael Burgio, Mark Novak, episode 1415. The biggest mistakes when negotiating a commercial lease. Let's talk about it. Morning, Mark.
Oh, hey, you ready for this one? Who pays for the lease? I always hear that and everyone's like dumbfounded by the question. The tenant, the landlord, the agent.
So for a retail lease, by law, it is the landlord. However, if the tenant sends like a million changes and a lot of them are unreasonable, then those variation charges can be paid by the tenant. With a commercial lease, i.e. a warehouse, an office space, historically it was 100% the tenant, but these days with a little bit more sort of say tenant power, buying power from the tenant side, it's becoming a lot more negotiated point. But previously it was just default tenant, and a lot of deals we're seeing 50-50 in the lease preparation cost, which a typical lease preparation cost is about $2,000.
Geez, that was a quick one. Let's imagine if we can blast through the rest of them like that. Okay, let's do it.
Yeah,
So
you're like, that's everything there.
that's everything there. Biggest mistake that you've seen, Burge, when you open up a lease. So you're a bit of a doctor when you open up a lease and you look at it and you go, What are the pinch points that you're looking at when you're looking at a lease? We are talking at the moment commercial. We could switch over to residential after, but tell me about commercial. Don't have to.
All right. I think the biggest thing to start from. So, do we want to go the tenant errors first or the landlord errors?
Okay, let's go. Let's say the landlord's throwing you a lease and said, "Check this out, see if it's all right." What do you think? What do you look at when you look at a lease?
The biggest thing I'm looking at, it seems quite simple, but the start date and the end date, so I can determine where the option period is. And because a lot of the time a landlord will do that, let's say they've done a 5-year lease and they're sort of 5 years into it or 4 and a bit, they go, the tenant's first term's running out, what's my position? They throw the lease. So a big point is finding out where they actually are situated in the lease, and a lot of owners don't know, or they miss the dates. Because with an option period, you've got to know if the rental negotiation will be at market rent or is it a fixed increase. Like Mark, just the difference there can be quite dramatic, especially over a 5-year lease term. The market's changed a lot, or can change a lot.
Yeah, wow. So that's all pre-negotiated up when you initially sign. So when you're a tenant or a landlord, you know that if you take up yes, I'd like to stay, the option, that may be a predefined number, or that may be a what's happened in the market. Let's look at the market. Let's do that number, market value. Yuck.
Yeah. And another big thing, I get the lease and it's like for 20 years, or it's got 5 options in the lease. It's a 2 plus 2. I saw one the other day. It was like a 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 up to 10 years. And I was like, wow, that's that's not the best for the owner. That's a bit of a mistake there.
And then with those rent increases, some people can string themselves up hard. Whether it's a landlord, like I've got clients that have signed a lease, like I think it's three plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. The option lays with the tenant, not with the landlord. So the landlord's committed to 12 years. The tenant's got 3 years if they want. They've got 6 if they want. They've got 9 or 12 if they want. Where the kicker was that the rent was so low. And I was just like, oh my God, you are getting such cheap rent here. and that was pre-programmed in the lease through their increases. And I was like, you just, the landlord's just been screwed. What agent would allow a landlord to sign a lease like this?
And just two parts there. Another reason why a lot of those options aren't favorable for the owner is the banks don't value them either. So a bank, I remember chatting with valuers. I'm like, oh, but there's an option for X amount, and they go, we don't even look at that. It's just a fixed
That's
term. But there's
Yep.
no advantage for that owner. They're giving the tenants, as you said, got
Yeah.
all the control for 12 years, and there's no benefit to the owner. It's not like that he can turn around and say, oh, the bank love it, that security. It's false. And just what you're saying with the lower rent, like, don't get me wrong, during COVID, there were some cheap rental deals done. But the biggest thing I said to the owner was, if we're going to do a cheap deal, we can only do a 1 or 2 year lease. Let's get the tenant in there. Let's have them do their fit out. They start their business, but then we can look at a market increase very, very quickly. But I know the lease you're talking about, it was like 5 years at nearly a half price rent.
So with these leases, this is really interesting what you said about finance. Owners have got to be really careful. It didn't seem like funding related a lot tied back to leases as hard than it does now. So you better make sure, Mr. Landlord, that you're doing a decent lease, a good lease, a wholesome lease, because your funder is gonna charge you a higher interest rate or not even give you funding if you've got a shit lease.
Yeah. Now, another thing, mistake is outgoings not clearly being stated. Where
Well,
I was going through a lease for a client the other day, and we're just looking at land tax, and the terminology was wrong. They called it proportion of building expenses. Now, that word doesn't really exist. It's either outgoings or utilities. A lot of people confuse fire, water, and electricity with outgoings, but no, they're the utilities. Outgoings are your land tax, council, and strata. And a lot of time in that lease, it's not clearly defined. So what happens is, and I've seen it on many properties, you get an offer accepted, and you're like, yeah, all outgoings paid, including land tax. And then we get to the lease, and it just says outgoings being paid. Say 100%
what
of
about
outgoings.
agents' fees? That's an outgoing.
That's exactly right. It just says 100% of outgoings, but where is that line? Because some people, when you say it's just outgoings, it's understood it's just council, water, and strata, and then sometimes it's council, water, strata, land tax, and then sometimes it's council, water, strata, land tax, building insurance, agent fees. So
What about
owners make
is property
mistakes.
maintenance an outgoing?
It can be, definitely, yeah. Anything
Right.
could be an
Yeah,
outgoing if
yeah,
it's
yeah. What a war zone.
if it's listed. And it's not good enough to just say 100% of outgoings, because everybody has different standards. And someone from the outside must hear this and be like, how is that, like, how can that get screwed up? You're either paying all the outgoings or you're not.
How do you
But
miss that? How do you miss that? Yeah.
Is the thing. So a lot of owners don't make it clear in the lease, and it may not bite you year one, but in 5 years' time, especially if that tenant sells their
Yeah.
business and the new tenant goes through that lease with a fine-tooth comb and says, it doesn't say I pay this. Where does it say I pay this? And you can miss out.
That's a good. Yeah, because when you're compounding these mistakes or compounding these benefits or whatever you want to call them, depending on whose favour it's in, this can add up to 50 grand, 100 grand. They can be big numbers. So these leases, if you've got a muppet of an agent that puts a lease together, which can happen, because you're trying to save money at the beginning, big mistake. So I like being one removed as a landlord and having a solicitor check that lease and do that lease, because I think the solicitor gives their two bobs worth as well as the agent. So you may have selected an agent that hasn't negotiated the lease properly, but the solicitor often will turn around and go, This is a bit, well, this is not right, it's a bit shit. Or vice versa. You may have an agent that's guiding the deal to be a stronger lease and telling the solicitor to make it a stronger lease in terms of what its terms and the way it's being worded.
Now, so that's the owner. What about the tenant? What are some big mistakes a tenant makes when they're negotiating a lease?
Look, first time tenants, I find, are weaker in their negotiations. Probably not anymore with ChatGPT, but they're weaker with their negotiations. And the creeper is the outgoings, and the creeper is the rent increases. So if a landlord can get a tenant to sign on a 5% increase per annum fixed and an option period, it's a fixed increase of 5% again, that can add up to a lot of money after 7 years, 8 years, 10 years.
No, you're exactly right. And I think sometimes tenants just need to slow down and do the numbers where you're exactly right. And sometimes an owner will go, okay, instead of $500 a week, I'll take you $450, but I want 5% annual increases instead of 3. And at the point of signing, the tenant thinks they've gotten the best deal. But as you said, yeah, after 5 or 10 years in that premise and that rent's going up, they're like, wow, these increases really add up. So
And you see with the experienced landlords, they're really good at that.
Yes, they play the long game very, very well. And a lot of tenants need to do that. Another mistake tenants make is the condition of the property when accepting it and then leaving. What are their expectations?
Oh.
What are they meant to do? Because a lot of the time, a tenant will get the property in not the best condition, and then they think they can leave it in that condition. But what they forget is they got rent free. The point of the rent free to do the work has now taken that they got that property with brand new carpet, brand new painting, and that's how they've got to get it back. So a lot of the times they don't understand, like they ask for the rent free and then they don't know what that includes. And a lot of the time,
make good clause.
Yeah, a make good clause. It's massive. It's nothing that's never considered with a tenant, but it's a big cost. We just got a defect cost on a property, $50,000. Now imagine having your bond, you want to get that back, or you're closing because your business isn't doing well, getting hit with a $50,000 bill just to rip everything you put in out, or even just to bring it back to the condition the landlord expects, but you weren't aware it had to be brought that back, and it was an unsurprising cost. So that can definitely be a mistake a tenant makes.
Well, they are the mistakes when negotiating commercial lease. There's some basic ones, but always feel free to ring us. Even if you're not from the area, out of the area, not a Novak customer, always feel free to ring us and ask us, go, hey, I saw this episode and I'm worried about this, or can you help me with that? We're always happy to help you guys. I just had a client last night that I met when I was at dinner, and he reminded me, I said that to him and he took me up on it a long time ago. We've done a lot of business since. Always feel free to, he was buying something on Central Coast. So always feel free to ring us up and ask us, even if there's not in a dollar for us.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Burgio. See you later.